called the cycle of sansara. And it's this cycle, samsara, some of that. Yeah, there's many names for it. I just use that, So this is what we're trying to break here. And the thing that keeps us coming back here all the time is our attachments. And that's our choosing, okay? Choosing to be outside of ourselves, choosing the ego, choosing separation. Remember what I said earlier on? If you're spending your day choosing the ego now, and you're going to do that for the rest of your life, when you come back here, you're going to choose the ego again. Because the ego is a choice for separation. That's all the ego is. It's a choice for you to be separate. Okay? So that choice begins now and every day here. So, here, the story that goes in A Course in Miracles is that we were in heaven and we were perfect with God and everything was dandy. And then we had a thought. And what was the thought that we had? We had the thought that we could be separate. And that thought was generated through our desire to be special. Okay. Now, let me just read this. Extension as undertaken by God is similar to the inner radiance that the children of the Father inherit from Him. We are like God. God creates only like Himself, but we are not God. Okay? Now, heaven is a state of oneness. It's a state of non-consciousness. Okay? Remember that. So Jesus says, except ye become little children. Do anybody know what that means? Means that unless you fully understand the relationship between the Father and the Son, you will be forever in a state of conflict. This requires God's endowment of the Son with free will, because all love in creation is freely giving in one continuous line in which all aspects are the same order. So, the story that we read in A Course in Miracles and in the Bible where we fell asleep, we didn't fall asleep. We were never awake. We have never been awake in heaven. And I know I'm going to receive a lot of emails from a lot of people, especially the intellectuals, looking at this. All I would say is read the Course again, because it's in it. And it's also been stated that God doesn't know that we're here. Okay? And this is not true. Why? Jesus says in the Course, God placed a limit on our ability to miscreate. Okay? So why would He do that? And it also says here in the Course, I'll read it again. This requires God's endowment of the Son with free will. Now, heaven is a state of oneness, non-consciousness. Is there free will in heaven? No, because there's nothing separate from anything else.
What's non-consciousness? What's non-consciousness?
It's a state where there's nothing separate from anything else. When you're unconscious of something conscious. So you're implying separation. So what Jesus is really saying in these lines, okay, we have been asleep. We have never been awake. And to give you another analogy of this, it's like any mums in the room. Yeah? And when the baby is inside your tummy, all right, the baby doesn't know who it is. But the baby doesn't know who you are, doesn't know who his father is. Okay, isn't this true? The baby is in a state of being. It has no awareness. Yeah? How does the baby become aware?
Separation.
It separates. It be born. It separates out from the mum. And then, where does it go? To school. And it's taught who it is, and is taught who our parents are. And that's the proper interpretation of the ego thought system. But the problem is this, okay? God spoke to me one night, and he said to me very clearly, and this was back many years ago, he says, you're not God. But there's nothing inside you that's not of God. And herein lies the problem. Okay? And what Jesus is saying there, except ye become little children. Okay? We must understand that we're not God. You look around in your life, in your relationships, governments, countries, everybody's trying to play God. Because they believe inside the God essence is in them, and we all believe that we are God, because God gave us everything that he has. So what is the best way that we can discover who we are? We have to lose ourselves. And then we have to remember who we are. And this is the true meaning of life. This is what it's all about. Something amazing is happening at this time for all those people who are on the path to waking up. You're becoming conscious, you're becoming aware for the very first time. There's two states in heaven. Remember, heaven is a continuous line of extension. So what that means is God is always extending himself out through himself. And that's who we are. We are that extension of God. So that would be awareness. Right? And I know, before people get on to me, I'm putting separation into heaven, but I need to put form in just to show this what it's about. Then the other state that's in heaven is called being. Okay? And that's who we are. We have always existed. What has a beginning will always have an end. What has no beginning can have no end. In God, being awareness, and that's what God is, it's not outside us, it's inside us, it's called awareness, all right, has always existed. And as long as God has existed, we have existed as part of God. So before the separation, we made a contract with God. Okay? We made a contract to waken up. Jesus says in the Course, it was not thrust upon us. The song that the Son sings to the Father, and the Father sings to the Son, is one of mutual consent. And that's the agreement. Okay? So we chose how we were going to waken up. This is why there's no guilt that Jesus says in the Course over and over again. There's no guilt. You didn't do anything wrong.
Who's the we that chose?
Sorry?
Who's the we that chose?
We as one, the Son of God. Jesus, and religion tells us that Jesus was the only Son of God. Jesus is saying we're all the sons of God. We're all here, and we all believe we're separate. And he's saying, I am the same as every one of you. There's no difference between me and you. There's no difference between any of you in this room. There's nobody any more special. There's nobody any more guilty than anybody else. Okay? We're all one. We are the Christ. That's what he says in the Course. Christ is not Jesus alone. The Christ is basically every life form, animate and inanimate on this planet. Every animal. Every bird, every fish, every tree, every blade of grass is Christ. Everything here is oneness. And is being fragmented into all of these different perceived people, places, all these, everything you see is a fragmentation of Christ. So here's the key. It's until you accept, remember from our own perception, when we accept everybody in this world, without excluding anybody or anything, we become one in Christ, and therefore we become one in God. And we can only return to heaven as one. The solitary, Jesus says, will only enter through the gate. And when he's talking about one, when we are all one, and this is why beliefs separate, divide, and fragment us all. I have no beliefs on anything. And neither shall I ever hold another belief, because beliefs will separate you from one another. And everybody has different sets of beliefs on this and that. To get to level 3 is where we're all trying to get to. It's beyond belief. And what that means, you're beyond all attachments to beliefs. So, 25, 30 people in this room, and you all have different beliefs, maybe Buddhists, Islam, Christians, Protestants, Catholics, you name it all in here. And I'm standing up here. It doesn't matter to me. I accept all of your beliefs that you're entitled to them. Religion says no. If you are a member of our church, everybody else is excluded. Okay? There are 25,000 different forms of Christian religions. So you can imagine how many people are feeling separated from one another in the world. This is what religion does. Spirituality is oneness. To be truly spiritual means that you accept everybody as equal in one another. Nobody is any different. Okay? So what happens is we had to, in this state of being, we made the choice to waken up. And we can't waken up in heaven. We have to perceive outside of heaven in a dream. And that's what the dream is all about. The reason why we can't waken up in heaven, because this is where we're going to go, here. Okay? We're going to go from being into awareness. Okay? And we can't do that in a state of oneness, because we have to know ourselves. And if there's nothing separate from anything else in heaven, how could we know who God or awareness is? Or how can we know who ourselves are? Okay? So what we had to do, we had to go into a dream. And in that dream, Jesus tells a story. And in the story, he says, okay, we fell asleep. We had a thought. Okay? And in the dream, we actually, it's been repeated, how we would have wakened up in heaven. Okay? So imagine if we woke up in heaven. We would all thought we were God. And that's what the story in the dream is. We didn't know, or we wouldn't know who we are. And that's what that line is saying here. Except ye become little children. Okay? Unless you fully understand the relationship between the Father and the Son, you will be forever in a state of conflict. And that's where we are here. And this is where we have to sort out our differences, because we're all in a state of conflict here. Some here believe they're God, and some here believe they're victims. And that's who the Son is. And until we accept everybody in oneness in Christ. And now this is not about getting 1 million people to do this. It's all that the Course is asking is for you to do it within yourself. Religion is dependent upon having millions and millions of worshippers. Spirituality is about one person, only the perceiver. Okay? So what we did, and the other thing that Jesus says in the Course, it would be too traumatic and too fearful for us to waken up in heaven. Okay? So that dream takes us here. You know the diagram? And this is where we are in the dream. So what happens is now, here is just a light that I actually was witness to for a few seconds. Okay? But here is darkness. Here is light. Here's more light. And here's a brighter light. And here's a brighter light. And here is the light of heaven. So you can see we're going up this ladder as we choose to do so. Okay? That's what time's for. We choose to do this at our own pace, because look at the fear that you have now of doing a meditation last year. Do you remember?
Yeah.
Okay? Some people went into hell. All they were doing was sitting there. So you can imagine that experience of you waking up in heaven like that. We have a great fear of the light. We have a great fear of what's inside. So that's where we start from the bottom up. We undo this fear here, and we go here, and we go here, and we go here, and here. Because the fear to waking up in heaven would be far too much for us. Because we have no idea of what heaven is and the magnitude of what it is. And this is the meaning of life. One step at a time. So that goes back to the fact, all right, that if you are not choosing heaven every day here, at least once, at least twice, then you're still in that state of fear. It's got nothing to do with the ego. The ego is assisting you on the awakening up journey. Okay, and then some people say, why is it so hard to waken up? We are not going to waken up until we have experienced every single thing that we're here to experience. And this is the beauty of what it's all about. Alright? Imagine there's 7 or 8 billion people on the planet now, right? So there's 8 billion people who will say all having a different experience in this lifetime, yeah? So imagine if you had to come, and then there's going to be many lifetimes, yeah? So you could go maybe 1,000, so you would have 8,000 billion times, right? So imagine if we had to do that on our own. Come and recycle and recycle and recycle 8,000 billion times. Wow. See, the beauty of this is we're all experiencing this simultaneously 8 billion times in one lifetime. Isn't that amazing? Everybody here in this lifetime now is experiencing, we're all one, yeah? Now that oneness has fragmented into 8 billion times. So that means there's a part of you having a different experience with everybody in the world. You see? So you don't have to keep coming here for 8,000 billion times. You're actually having 8 billion experiences now, but you're only experiencing one of them. But why? Because you believe that you're separate from the other 8 billion people. Do you know what I mean? Once you come into the oneness, you're going to have the experience and the expansiveness and the magnitude of joining with everybody's experience. Isn't that amazing? You get that?
Good experiences or bad?
Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Because the thing about this is we're not going to, when we go back to heaven, to this point, there's nothing that we haven't experienced that we would think, oh, I never tried that. Because when we get back to this point here, we're all one. We're all fragmented here, but when Jesus says in the Course, all the experiences, all of the gifts of the sons of God will be shared equally at the end. So it means when we become one again, you will have the same experience that everybody's experienced here. And the whole point of this experience is, no, so that we can experience separation. So there's 3, this is what the purpose of the separation is. There's many teachers out there who are asked the question, what's the purpose of the ego? And they say, no purpose. Couldn't be further from the truth. The most important purpose in this world is the purpose of the ego, the purpose of the separation. 1, is to wake up to our own realization, self-realization. We must remember who we are, that we're not God. Because what this is really saying, we're not going to remember God until we remember ourselves as Christ. The second purpose is to experience every aspect of separation. Okay? And what's the third one?
To realize we don't want it.
Yes. To choose against separation, so we'll never ever choose against God, against love, or against heaven ever again. And that's what the purpose of the ego, the purpose of the meaning of life is really all about. So, you're not here. Imagine when there's people ask this question, what's the purpose? What's this all about? And someone says, no purpose. Do you really think that God would put us through all of this for absolutely no reason whatsoever? So I would say to all the teachers of the Course, all the students of the Course all around the world, we have never been awake. And the ego is there to help us in that awakening. Listen to the ego, understand what the ego is, appreciate the ego, and you can transcend the ego. Or you have another choice. You can fight with the ego, project everything within yourself onto the ego. Okay? And let me just read what Jesus says here about the ego. Undoing the ego, it says. To the ego, to be undone means to be destroyed. The ego will not be destroyed because it is a part of your thought. But because it is uncreative and therefore unsharing, it will be reinterpreted to release you from fear. Do you understand what that's saying? We must reinterpret the ego. If we're feeling in fear, if we're feeling guilty, anxious, depressed, judgmental, the ego is telling us, hey, you can come and play with me if you want, but this is what I'm all about.
Every one of those is a wake-up call.
Yes. And if we don't listen to this, what we're trying to do is fight with the ego all the time. We fear the ego. And you can write this down. What you fear, you empower. Okay? So therefore you're given the ego and the ego thought system, when it's just your decision to be separate, all the power over you to keep you asleep. The whole point of this is for us to awaken up, to realize that we have the power to choose. We can choose heaven or hell. Every other choice in this world is an illusion of a choice. There is no other choices. And we start these choices every day, whether they're the right mind or the wrong mind. That's how simple it is.
I might have taken you up, a bit wrong earlier on there. Did you say that in heaven there was a state of unconsciousness?
No, non-consciousness.
Non-consciousness. What exactly is that?
It means there's no separation. If you're unconscious of something conscious. So you're implying separation. That's what the dream is. It's perception. You have wrong perception, you have true perception, which is consciousness. Jesus says in the Course, consciousness was the second level introduced to the dream, which meant now we had a choice. But because we went from non-consciousness into unconsciousness, and now we're going from unconsciousness into consciousness. That's the way we're waking up. We couldn't go from non-consciousness to consciousness. It would have scared the living daylights out of us. So imagine if we all woke up in heaven. How many world wars would be up there?
Did you say that you seen the light in heaven? Did I hear you say that? Yeah. What was that like? What did
You buy my book, it's coming out now shortly. It was just a second, but it was a very traumatic time that I went through. And I surrendered, I did a complete surrender. I knew no spirituality whatsoever, which was a blessing. Because if I had it, I wouldn't have woken up the way I did. And I surrendered and I entered into this other dimension of pure light. But I was only in the light a second to realize that I was the light. See now? The light wasn't anything separate from me. It was the expansiveness of everything, and I was everything. And that's what was shown to me 7 years ago.
That before you start doing this? Or?
Yeah. And I've written 3 books in the last 7 years, so the first one's coming out now shortly. I've been saying that for a while. And the title of the book, just to bring you up on the speed on the book's finished. It's just going through the final proofreading now, and it's going into design, so we're hoping the deadline to have it for Easter. And the title of the book is Truth Now Has a Voice. And Truth Now Has a Voice. And what this is really about, there's more and more people now hearing the voice for God, as it's called in the Course, the voice for Jesus, the voice for the Holy Spirit. And this is the title that I was directed to use, because in this I have been listening to the voice, and the voice has given me a lot of information, and that's the information that I teach. So this is really all about, like, if people would be still in their minds and their hearts. This is one of the quotes of Jesus for it. If man would be still in his mind and his heart, you'll hear the voice for God. So if you don't hear his voice, he says very clearly and very loudly, it's because you choose not to hear it. Because we're listening to another voice. There's only 2 voices. There's the voice of the ego and there's the voice for God. And you're always listening to one or the other. So.
Are you still frightened? You said you were frightened. There's a book coming out, you'd have to run.
We'll see. Well, the way Jesus talked about that, he says it's only your ego's going to be
That's it.
put out about this. So anything that's left inside me is going to come out over the next year or so.
Just one thing, Michael, talk about we're not God,
Yeah.
but there's a part of God in us,
Everything that's inside us is of God.
is of God.
Yes.
Yeah.
But we have to learn that we are not God, so therefore we are the creation of God.
God.
That's what the purpose of the whole thing is about. We couldn't do this in heaven. We can't do this in heaven because there's no way we can be separate from God. There's no, the world, I don't even like using the word God, if you know what I mean, because God was something that was brought into the world 10,000 years ago. People looked up and they made the sun of God, they made the moon of God, and they made all kinds of things God. So everybody thinks of God, they think of something outside themselves. So what Jesus is saying very clearly, God is not outside you, God's within you, God's a part of you, God is you, but you're not God. And that's
Does God know about the ego?
Of course, well, when you see, when Jesus says there, God endowed the Son with free will. So what is free? Where does free will take place? It takes in the world and in the land of perception, and that's what the ego is.
Sorry, I think I misheard that, but God knows nothing about what's going on in the world. Is that right?
It's God in me. It's God in you.
Then
Yes. But I'm sure it was said before that God knows nothing.
When I'm standing here
Right, when you say
and centered in myself, okay, I'm at one with God, and God knows everything about me. When I step outside myself,
Right, into the
okay, I'm saying, God, you just stay there for a while. I want to go out here and
All
try
right,
and do
so-
things myself. Now, I'm choosing to be separate from God. Okay? And God said, you go ahead. As like little children. At the bottom of the garden, they'll build a little house or something and they'll think that the parents don't know it's their little getaway. And this is what the whole thing's about. We believe we have created this little world for ourselves. And we're here and we're trying out and we're all playing cowboys and Indians and fighting each other, trying to kill each other, all of these things. The only thing that you can kill is the illusion of yourself. What is inside of us is within inside everybody, which is spirit. We're all eternal, we're all immortal, okay? And we're invulnerable. Nothing can destruct what God has created because God created us like himself, which is spirit.
Where did the separation come into it then, and why did it come
purpose
into
of
it?
separation.
Sorry?
The purpose of separation.
Yeah, like what's...
Because for us to waken up, we can't waken up in heaven. We've been asleep, we've been inside, like the baby that's inside. Baby has to separate from its mother.
Well,
Is it a learning process?
Of course, and of course Jesus calls this world what a classroom. And he repeats over, we have lessons, like children go to school, they have lessons. And every lesson that comes up, we can learn it, and if we don't learn it, it'll be repeated over and over until we do learn it. So, when you have the same pattern in your life being repeated, one thing to say to you is, I'm not recognizing what the lesson is. So you see them 3 steps. They can be applied to everything here. If you're not recognizing what's going on, what the lesson is, what the projection is, what you're seeking, if you're not recognizing, then you're going to be fumbling about in the dark. You're not going to understand what anything's for.
You know what example you give of the child in the womb?
Yeah.
That child is in a state, are you saying, of non-consciousness?
On non-consciousness.
Non-consciousness.
Yes.
It's not in a state of awareness, is it?
No. What? It can't be.
All right, so then I'm applying that then, to the heaven.
Yeah.
Now, you're saying we need to waken up, we need to become aware.
Yeah.
But if heaven is a non-conscious state
Yeah.
for us, where does the awareness come into it?
Right. It's like this. Think of an airplane. I was thinking in bed last night that someone was going to ask this question, so fair play to you, David, right? Think of an airplane, all right? And you know what Jesus says, heaven is a state of continuous extension. So think of the airplane driving along, right? And imagine now, that God is the pilot. And all the passengers are all us, all right? God's in charge of the creation. He's in charge of the airplane. He knows where it's going. He's in control over the speed. He's in control over the direction of everything. Yeah. You have that in your mind. And we're all the passengers, and it's a big airplane, all right? And God wants us, there's one seat available right next to him. Okay? One seat. And when we become one, he wants us to be co-creator with him. So he's kind of going to sit back and let us be the driver, the creations of heaven. We are going to be aware now of everything. We're going to be aware of our creations, that he says, which is our extensions. And not only that, we're going to be aware of everything we're creating. We're going to be aware of God. We're going to be aware of ourselves. But as long as we're passengers in that state of being, we're just sitting there kind of asleep in the back of the airplane. But we're in this, because we're in heaven, we're in this state of perfection. Okay? There's nothing wrong with us. Not in regard that way. All we have to do is wake it up. But remember, there's only one seat. And until we become one in the passengers, we can't get through that cockpit, as more than one. So this is the analogy of what it's all about. So when we're in sitting beside Jesus, or beside God, then we are aware the same as God. We'll still know that we're not God, but we'll have that awareness of creation. So that's the two states. One is awareness and the other is being. So we're going to hold on to our sense of being, and that means our bliss of who we are. But now we're going to gain awareness of what everything's for. Is that it?
Yeah.
You happy?
Yes, pretty good.
Okay, folks, thank you very much.